Chapter Beyond the Walls. Evening silence at St. Oswald's obeyed its own rule-book. After evening roll call, common rooms. After 10, dormitories. After 11, lights out, and anyone caught out of bed stopped being a person and turned into a disciplinary issue. Rose sat in an empty corner of the library, her notebook open at a page that hadn't gained a single new word in an hour. In the margin, only a few letters repeated over and over. J.H. A.W. August 1976. Her pen hovered over the initials.
"If you stare any harder, the letters are going to write back," a voice said above her.
She jumped and looked up. Matt was at the end of the table, leaning against it.
"What are you doing here?" she asked, snapping the notebook shut on reflex.
"Officially," he shrugged, "looking for material for an essay on public trust."
"And unofficially?" she pressed.
"Avoiding my father," he said without hesitation, "and anything that looks like his shadow."
He sat down opposite her and set his bag on the floor. For a while, he just studied her. "You've got the same look you had in the chapel," he said at last. "Like someone who's just been reclassified in the catalog from person to exhibit." She said nothing. The pen started tracing circles around the initials again. "I've been thinking about the letter," Matt went on. "The tickets, all of it. I've come to the conclusion that if we stay in this school, the only thing that comes out of it is more notes in the files." He glanced at the day timetable on the wall, the tidy grid of bells and breaks pretending to outrank any other schedule. "Julian left us another timetable," he added. "The real one, with an address." Her heart lurched up into her throat. The address. The sender from the nearby town, Hartley. "We don't know what's there," she said carefully. "Maybe nothing. Maybe someone sold it, forgot it, burned it years ago." "Maybe," he agreed. "But there's one thing I'm sure it doesn't have." "What's that?" she asked. "Whitby's," he said, "or Hartley's from a report. That place exists outside this wall, outside what's been written about us. That's what interests me." He rested his elbows on the table. "We have to go," he said, as calmly as if he were suggesting the reading room rather than breaking one of the school's cardinal rules, "before anyone else thinks of it." Rose tightened her grip on the pen hard enough that the plastic complained. "We have to?" she echoed. "You have to find out whether your uncle really traded a boy for a scholarship. She broke off. The word snagged in her throat. "I have to know whether I'm another Hartley from an obituary or just from the attendance sheet." "So do you," he cut in gently. "If Julian had your surname, you're not going to settle for personal tragedy of pupil J.H. You're not built to live with not knowing." She stared at a groove worn into the tabletop by years of sliding books back and forth. "I could ask my mother," she said after a moment, though she might as well have said, "I could jump out that window." She'd explain, maybe, in her own time, in her own language. "And what would she say?" Matt made a face. "Distant relatives, old business, nothing to do with me? No offense to Hartley mothers, but you've never sounded like she answers much of anything." His voice held no mockery, only the flat accuracy of someone writing up a report, the reminder that they had once actually known each other. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. "We send a polite inquiry to the first number in the phone book? Call from a station payphone? Good evening, did a tragedy from 1976 happen to lodge with you?" "I suggest we go beyond the wall," he said. "Simply that. For once, not on a supervised school march, not under anyone's eye.
because we need something." The word wall dropped between them, heavier than it had to. St. Oswald's had its own legends about those who had tried. Leaving school grounds without permission was more than a minor infraction. It was an attack on the whole idea of a sealed world.
"You get expelled for that," Rose reminded him, "or worse, politely invited to withdraw your Cavendish application."
"Cavendish," Matt repeated. "The scholarship my uncle might have been ready to leave someone on a platform for. The scholarship my father uses to treat me like a project, and you like a threat." He watched her closely. "How much more are we supposed to sacrifice before we realize this Grant is just another name for the same cage?" he asked quietly. She fell silent. "If I don't go," she said at last, slowly, "I stay here with an obituary in my head and never find out if it's my family's. If I do go, I could lose everything." "Or gain something," he said. "The truth. That's the one currency the head can't regulate." They looked at each other, waiting for the other to be the first to say no. Neither of them did. Outside, dusk deepened. The courtyard lights blinked on, one by one. "What time do your lights go out?" she asked suddenly. 11, he said automatically. "But the last corridor round ends at 10 past. In the girls' wing, the duty prefect tends to cut corners when he sees Hartley on the sheet," she said. "He assumes I'm in the library. He'll sign me in again." The pen stopped moving. She set it down carefully on the open page. "So we've got something like 20 minutes between the last round and anyone realizing I'm not dutifully in bed," she said. "If we leave then, we hit the wall before anyone starts checking rooms." "You know the forest paths?" Matt asked. "I know all the routes I'm not supposed to know," she said. "You?" "I know the ones the Whitbys know," he said with a brief smile. "Between us, we might find one no one else does." Silence settled. Not library silence this time, the kind where decisions become real. Rose snapped the notebook shut. "Fine," she said. "We go." "You finally don't sound like someone who's just listed every possible consequence," he observed. "I've done the math," she said, "and for the first time in a long time, it feels like I lose either way. If I'm going down, I'd rather do it on my own terms." She stood. The chair squeaked. "We'll meet at the east stairs," she added, "where the pipe always leaks. No one goes there after 10. No lights, and they're afraid of getting dripped on." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Perfect," he said. "So far, we've only been scared of things with stamps on them. Time to be scared of something else." He grabbed his bag, then paused. "Rose?" he said over his shoulder. "Yes?" "If it turns out Julian isn't related to you," he said, "it won't change what the school did to him, or to Arthur." "I know," she said, "but it'll change what it's trying to do with me." He nodded, serious, like someone acknowledging that they weren't just adjudicating on someone else's past, but altering their own future. When he left, the library was alone again with its stacks and timetables. Rose checked the clock. A few minutes till evening roll call. A little less than 2 hours until they'd be at the wall. She looked back at the initials in the margin. J.H. A.W. She added 2 more letters beneath. R.H. M.W. Then she closed the notebook, switched off the lamp, and walked out, leaving the silence behind. This time, it didn't even pretend to be peace.
When the lights went out at St. Oswald's, the building still flickered for a moment like a living organism. Last lamps in the corridors, long shadows of teachers, floorboards creaking under prefects' boots. Then only the checkpoints remained. Floodlights on the courtyard, the yellow pool at the gate, the distant city glow over the tree line.
Rose waited by the east stairs, backpack over one shoulder, listening to the drip of the pipe overhead. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each drop was one breath too many. When the footsteps at the far end of the corridor faded and the duty room door thudded shut, someone slid out of the shadow under the stairs.
"You're late," she muttered. 3 minutes. Matt lifted his hands. "I had to convince my roommate I've suddenly discovered a passion for Russian literature and need my lamp till midnight." "When we get back, you can give him first-hand notes on crime and punishment," she said. "Practical edition." He smiled briefly. In the dark, it looked more like a twitch.
"Ready?" he asked.
She wasn't. She nodded anyway.
They slipped out through the kitchen service door. She knew the corridor from dishwashing shifts. Now, for the first time, she saw it with the lights off, only a narrow wedge of moon coming through a small window.
Outside, the air was sharper than by day. The grass shone with dew, gravel on the paths muffled their steps instead of amplifying them. The school buildings looked like a model, too neat, too symmetrical. "The forest's that way," Matt whispered, pointing past the playing fields, "and the path that doesn't exist on any map." "Of course the Whitbys have a private path through the forbidden wood," Rose muttered. "Do you get it with the family crest?" "We get it with a family that hates public entrances," he said. "Come on." They ran along the edge of the pitch, like thieves, hoping the floodlights wouldn't glance their way. The worst moments were crossing open stretches. Rose felt as if every window had eyes. Beyond the fields, the trees began. In daylight, the wood was just backdrop to stories about ghosts, suicides, and missing pupils. At night, it turned into a solid wall. "Students say every tree remembers a tragedy," she whispered. "Students are scared of anything that doesn't go in a grade book," Matt said. "There are more tragedies here than trees." Even so, he paused at the first trunk. They listened. Leaves, distant cars on the road beyond the hill, a long cry from some night bird. "If we get caught now," she began. "We get a shorter walk to the obituary," he finished. "Rose, either we go or we go back to filing other people's deaths." That decided it. They stepped between the trunks. The path was narrow, barely visible in the half-light. Sometimes they walked side by side, more often one behind the other. Branches scraped her sleeves, wet grass slapped her shoes. When a root reared up unexpectedly under her foot, she pitched forward. Before she could hit the ground, Matt's hand clamped around her fingers. "Easy," he said, pulling her upright. "It's just a tree. We haven't reached the ones that bite yet." "I was hoping the forest wouldn't have your sense of humor," she muttered, straightening. He didn't let go immediately. For a few steps, their fingers stayed linked, as though neither wanted to be the first to break contact. "How many times have you done this?" she asked, once they found a rhythm. "Enough to know there's a fallen trunk around the next bend," he said. "Not enough to stop feeling like an idiot every time I'm here." "Why do it at all? You could ask the Whitby driver to take you into town. The head wouldn't say no, not to you." "It's not an escape if someone opens a car door for you," he said. "It's just another line in the schedule." They crossed a patch of ground that bounced like a sponge. Rose felt the adrenaline mix with something else, a thin, fierce flicker of joy. For the first time since arriving, she was doing something that didn't fit any system. A strange, illicit lightness seeped through her.
Eventually, the trees thinned. Between the trunks, the town lights appeared, yellow, uneven, human.
"Almost there," Matt said. "We'll come out by the graveyard. Fitting, really."
"Of course," she said. "Where else would we leave school grounds if not by a cemetery?"
St. Oswald's walled itself off, but here the wall was lower. They scrambled over and squeezed between a tool shed and the back of a florist's.
Suddenly, they were on an ordinary street. Asphalt, lamp posts, parked cars, the far-off thump of music from a pub. Rose felt like someone had changed films, from cold stone to something smelling of chips and cigarettes.
They walked a few meters in silence until they stepped under the first streetlight. Only in its yellow pool could she really see him. Disorientation jabbed at her. She rarely saw him out of uniform, which at St. Oswald's felt like his second skin. In a navy hoodie and track pants, he looked almost offensively normal. The kind of boy she could have passed in a crowd without ever suspecting him of dissecting old case files. The sudden ordinariness was more unsettling than any of his classroom arrogance.
"So, this is the famous town," he said, breaking her thoughts. "Civilization in 5 shops and 3 bars."
"It looks like the capital of the world to me," she said. "No bells, no duty lists, no donors' boards. Good enough."
They walked on without speaking. No one paid them much attention. 2 teenagers in everyday clothes were hardly noteworthy here.
They passed the news agent, a shuttered bookshop, a hairdresser with sun-bleached photos of outdated cuts in the window. Around a corner a sign flickered, the Railway Arms.
"Subtle," Matt said. "Bar by the station for people in need of a getaway."
"Let's hope it's subtle inside," Rose muttered. "I'd rather not be thrown out before we finished pretending we got lost."
Inside it smelled of beer, fried food, and old wood. The light was warm and yellow, far kinder than in the school dining hall. A handful of regulars sat at the bar. 2 men were playing darts. A radio hummed in the corner. The barman raised his eyebrows.
"Lose your way, kids?" he said.
"Yes," Rose said, beating Matt to it, "but only a little. This is the nearest place that serves hot tea after 10.
He ran his eye over her.
"Tea," he repeated. "2?" "2," she said, "and some chips, if you don't need ID for potatoes." He snorted and nodded at a table by the window.
They sat opposite each other. Tiredness hit Rose all at once. The forest, the adrenaline, the case, the letter, all of it settled on her like layers of dust.
"Feel that?" she asked quietly.
"What?" Matt glanced away from the window. "That no one here knows who we are," she said, "or what our names are. We're just 2 teenagers who ordered tea."
He didn't answer at once. Then he smiled, differently this time, without the controlled irony.
"It's disturbingly nice," he admitted. "Like having the crest taken out of my spine."
"Don't get used to it," she warned. "In 2 hours you're Whitby again, and I'm Hartley from the reports." "But for those 2 hours," he began.
"We get to pretend we're someone else," she finished.
The tea arrived in thick, chipped mugs. It was too strong and too hot, and tasted like something outside any punishment system.
The chips followed. They ate with their fingers, burning themselves, snorting quietly when salt spilled onto the table.
"If anyone ever asks when I was most irresponsible," Matt said, reaching for another, "I'll say, the night I illegally ate chips in a cheap bar by the station."
"If anyone asks when I was bravest," Rose said,
I'll say, the night I didn't call my mother and followed an address from a letter instead.
He leaned back. You know, he said, if we'd met here, you'd probably think I was some boring boy who talks too much about politics and trains.
And you'd think I was the girl who knows the timetable by heart and has too many opinions about obituaries, she said, and everything would be easier.
But we met at St. Oswald's, he shrugged. So instead we get dead boys, scholarships, and my uncle's sins.
They watched the men at the bar laugh over a dart throw. They had their own disasters, their own griefs, but none were written into marble.
Rose? Matt said.
Whatever we find at that address, he said, I'm glad you came through the forest with me, that you didn't stay alone with that case and that name. She looked at him. For a second, the heraldic boy from the hall vanished, and she saw someone else, someone halfway between system's victim and system's accomplice.
I'm doing it for Julian. And for myself.
I know, he said. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate it.
She nodded, eyes on her mug.
A train rumbled past outside. The sound of wheels on tracks was muted but clear. They both fell silent.
August 1976, she said. Same rails.
Same surnames, Matt said.
They looked at each other. Suddenly the bar, the wood, the tea, all of it felt like thin paper laid over something much heavier.
Let's go, Rose said, setting her empty mug down, before another train leaves without Julian and Arthur.
They paid for the tea and chips from the pocketful of coins Matt produced. No one stopped them at the door. No one asked where they were from or where they were going.
Outside, the air was cooler, the lamplight harsher. They walked towards the bridge and the station, following Julian's words and the knowledge that for a few hours they'd been just Rose and Matt, not Hartley and Whitby.
The forest would be waiting on the far side, the way back, too. For now they kept going.
The address led them past the station, down side streets, to a place the town map labeled as nothing more than an underpass. In reality, the bridge looked older than anything at St. Oswald's.
A stone arch over a narrow road, walls layered with graffiti and damp stains. Above them, invisible but present, the tracks. Whenever a train passed, the structure shivered.
Here, Rose said, stopping under the arch. She pulled the folded page from her pocket. At the bottom of Julian's letter, in smaller script, he'd written, "Under the bridge by the station. I'll wait until the ground stops shaking."
Matt came closer. The place looked ordinary, almost disappointingly so.
I pictured something else, he muttered. I don't know, a plaque saying, "History derailed here."
The plaques are at St. Oswald's, she said. She studied the wall. On the left, it curved inward slightly, as if something had once stood there, a bench, a crate. At their feet, rings of dried puddles, crushed cigarette ends, a scrap of ticket so worn the print was gone.
Think he came? Matt leaned his shoulders against the damp stone. Julian, that he really stood here with that oversized bag? I think he at least tried, she said. The quitting was done by other people.
They listened to their own breathing. A platform announcement drifted over, its words blurred.
If he was here, Matt said, he was waiting for a Whitby who never showed.
She shrugged, though her chest tightened. But he got us, she said. 2 extremely late substitutes. 20 years late, he said. His hair was wet from the drizzle. A dark patch spread on his shoulder where water dripped from the arch.
"Ever think that if he'd made it out that day," Rose began, "no one would be forcing you to be the next Whitby in the set?"
"Starting with the existential what if, are we?" he snorted. "Yeah, I've thought about it. My whole role right now exists because someone didn't make it on time to a place like this. If Arthur had gone, the dynasty might have fallen apart before they could plan my future."
"So would mine," she said softly, "in a different way."
He looked at her. "I don't know the whole story," she said, "only that around then my mother had to suddenly leave St. Oswald's. No one at home says why. She never talks about it, only about the year after which we had to start from scratch."
She sighed, fingers on the cold stone.
"Sometimes I think my whole life's been built on someone else's no. Under another bridge, in another year," she went on. "We're children of other people's decisions. Some names get plaques. Others get death notices."
They fell quiet. Wind funneled through the tunnel, carrying damp and exhaust.
"Are you angry with me?" Matt asked, suddenly, more directly than usual. "Because of Arthur? Because I carry his name?"
"Yes," she said immediately. "And no, I'm furious about what he might have done, and that you're paying it off in installments, whether anyone calls it that or not."
"I'm angry at him too," Matt said, "for leaving me this mess and calling it family pride."
He clenched his fist and rested it against the wall. Water dripped onto his wrist.
"I want to hate him," he admitted. "But all I've ever had are stories about him saving the school in a crisis, and now this letter, which shows he couldn't save one boy under a bridge."
"The system getting to you?" she asked. "The system is coming out of my ears," he said.
Her laugh bounced too loudly between the walls. She cut it off. "We shouldn't laugh," she said. "This place isn't funny."
"We shouldn't be here either," he reminded her. "But here we are."
Another train clattered above them. The ground trembled. Rose felt the vibration climb her spine and rattle her ribs.
"I'll wait until the ground stops shaking," she quoted.
"The ground at that school never stops," Matt said. "There's always a train that left too early or too late."
He opened his eyes and looked at her. For once there was nothing heraldic in his gaze, only tiredness and something like relief that this was finally being said aloud.
"You know what scares me most?" he asked. "That in a minute we're going to go back behind the wall and pretend this was a research trip. And this is—" He broke off. "A point of no return," she said. "For us."
He nodded. The tunnel was narrow, but she felt a space opening between them that couldn't be closed again.
He stepped half a pace towards her.
"Rose," he said, "if you want, this is the moment you can say it was all a mistake, that we go back, hand the case to the head, let him wage his crusade, and we go back to being enemies on paper."
"I can't," she whispered. "Even if I wanted to. I've seen too much, and I saw you in it." His breathing was too fast for someone just standing there. So was hers.
"I want to hate you," she blurted before she could second-guess it. "For that name, for dragging me into that forest, this tunnel, this story." "I want to hate you too," he answered at once. "For tearing apart everything that had nice marble labels. For making me think I might get out, and that it might not look like winning. For making me see my father." She gave a crooked smile. "Solid basis for cooperation," she said. "Mutual, well-founded resentment." He moved another half step. The gap between them shrank to something absurd. There was nothing cinematic about it, no perfect angle, no dramatic lighting. Water dripped onto their hair. The air smelled of petrol and damp. Her hands were freezing. His nerves were frayed. At some point, one of them stopped analyzing. Did he lean in first? Maybe both. Maybe their foreheads bumped first, as if they meant only to brace themselves. Maybe his hand found the back of her neck, like a reflex rather than tenderness. Then their mouths collided. It was more impact than touch. All the tension of weeks, corridors, archive, chapel, dining hall, letters, obituaries funneled into one outlet. The kiss tasted of bar tea, salt, and something else, the metallic tang of fear. Rose felt all the anger she had towards the Whitbys, the Hartleys, the head, her mother, pour into that single desperate motion. She twisted her fingers into his hair, afraid that if she let go, everything would fall apart. He pulled her closer, pinning her to the wall, as if the only solid thing left was another body. For a few seconds, or years, there was only the rush of blood and the shudder of the bridge.
Matt was the one who eased back first, by a fraction. His breathing was ragged. He swallowed hard.
"That was a terrible idea," he said hoarsely.
"I know," Rose said. "Awful." Neither moved.
"We're not going to talk about this," he added, barely above a whisper. "At school, anywhere, to everyone else, we're still—"
"An overly ambitious headache for the Cavendish committee," she supplied.
"Perfect," he snorted. "And to ourselves?" She swallowed, the words crowding her tongue. Allies, witnesses, accident, all felt too small.
"To ourselves, we're," she began slowly, "people who know too much to pretend to be enemies." He let out a quiet laugh, edged with relief.
"A pact with no guarantees," he said. "Fits the place." He stepped back enough to see her face. The same mix of anger and hope was still in his eyes, but something else flickered through. They were no longer standing on opposite sides of the board. "If you ever use this against me," he said, tilting his head towards the space where the kiss had just been, "I swear I'll go to the head myself and ask for the most spectacular punishment he can devise." "If you ever pretend this was just a reflex," she replied, "I'll remind you that under this bridge there's no room for mercy, only decisions."
He nodded. A train rattled over their heads. This time the tremor didn't interrupt anything. It put a full stop on the scene.
"We should go," Rose said, finally stepping away, "before St. Oswald's notices its two favored witnesses have disappeared."
"Two?" He raised an eyebrow.
"Don't paint yourself as the victim," she said. "In this story, we're both martyr and accomplice. They left the bridge too fast for people who had supposedly done something they didn't mean to do. But whatever else St. Oswald's added to its files, one thing was certain. After this night, they weren't just Hartley and Whitby on opposite sides of a report. They were a footnote no one had predicted, though given their names and the school's history, someone should have.